The punch came out of nowhere. Willa Sawyer felt her knuckles connect with the man's jaw before her mind caught up with her body. The town dance hall went silent. 50 pairs of eyes locked onto her as the stranger staggered back, one hand rising to his bleeding lip, the other instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip. She knew that movement. She had seen it in the war, in the chaos that still woke her gasping some nights. But she did not flinch. "You do not put your hands on a woman without her leave," she said, her voice carrying across the sudden hush. "Not in Willow Fork. Not anywhere." The man straightened, and for the first time she really saw him. Dark blonde hair, weathered face, eyes the color of storm clouds, a duster coat that had seen hard miles, a gun belt worn low and easy. He studied her with an expression she could not read, something between surprise and reluctant respect. "I was not putting my hands on you," he said quietly. "I was trying to keep you from walking into that table." Willa glanced back. The refreshment table sat 2 feet behind where she had been stepping. Heat climbed her neck, but she refused to look away from him. "Then you should have used your words." A muscle ticked in his jaw. He lowered his hand from his gun, though his fingers still twitched near the holster. Around them, the fiddle music started again, tentative and off-key. Conversations resumed in urgent whispers. Willa felt the weight of judgment settle over her shoulders like a yoke. The stranger wiped blood from his lip with the back of his hand. "You have a hell of a right cross. I have a hell of a lot more than that," she said. "Now step aside." She moved past him, spine straight, ignoring the way her hand throbbed, ignoring the way every eye in the hall followed her to the door, ignoring the whispers that would follow her home and straight into Sunday service and probably into the next town meeting. Outside, the October night was cool and star-bright. Willa leaned against the rough wall of the dance hall and flexed her aching fingers. Stupid. Reckless. Exactly the kind of thing that made the church ladies cluck their tongues and the bank examiner shake his head when he reviewed the Silver Ranch accounts. The door opened behind her. She did not need to turn to know who it was. "You always this friendly to strangers?" the man asked. "You always this forward with women?" "Fair point." He moved to lean against the wall beside her, keeping a careful distance. "Micah Hale." She hesitated, then decided there was no point in rudeness now. "Willa Sawyer." "The horse breeder?" She glanced at him sharply. "You have been asking about me." "Not specifically." His gaze stayed on the dark street ahead. "But in a town this size, everyone knows everyone's business." "You run Silver Ranch. You lost your father 2 years back. You are 3 months behind on your mortgage, and the bank is making noise about foreclosure." Willa's jaw tightened. And why would a bounty hunter care about any of that? His eyes cut to her, sharp and assessing. "How did you know what I do?" "Your coat. Your gun. The way you move. And the fact that you are asking questions about other people's troubles usually means you are looking for someone." Micah was quiet for a moment. Then, he pushed off the wall and turned to face her fully. "I am looking for a man named Silas Greer. He robbed a payroll wagon outside of Abilene 6 months ago. Shot the driver. Left him for dead. Last anyone heard, Greer was headed west toward Willow Fork." Willa kept her expression neutral, but her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She knew that name. She knew it too well. "What makes you think he is here?" "Because 3 weeks ago, someone matching his description bought supplies at your general store, paid in coins that matched the mint marks from the stolen payroll. And you think I know something about that? Micah studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, refusing to give ground. I think, he said slowly, that you are scared. I think you saw something, or heard something, that put you in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think you are smart enough to know that keeping quiet about a man like Greer is more dangerous than speaking up. Willa felt the ground shift beneath her. She had spent 6 weeks telling herself that what she had seen in the livery stable that night was none of her business. That the man with the scar across his knuckles and the cold laugh was just another drifter passing through. That the conversation she had overheard about a canyon hideout and a split take was nothing she needed to repeat. But Micah Hale was not going to let this go. And if he kept asking questions, kept poking at the edges of her silence, Silas Greer would know. Men like Greer always knew. I cannot help you, she said. Cannot or will not. Both. She started to walk past him, but he caught her arm. Not roughly, not the way the man inside had grabbed, but firm enough to stop her. If you know where he is, you are already in danger. Greer does not leave loose ends. Then maybe you should stop making so much noise about it, she snapped, pulling free. Go back to wherever you came from and let this town handle its own problems. Your town is 3 months away from losing the only horse breeder within 50 miles. Your congregation is so busy gossiping about your temper, they have forgotten what charity looks like. And your sheriff is 60 years old, with a bad hip and no deputies. You really think Willow Fork can handle a man like Silas Greer? Willa stopped, turned. Micah stood in the spill of lantern light, his expression hard and certain. But beneath the certainty, she saw something else. Something that looked almost like understanding. Why do you care? She asked. Because I took an oath once, a long time ago. And I am trying to remember what it felt like to keep it. The words hung between them, raw and unexpected. Willa felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the wall she had built around her own war memories and her own unanswered oaths. If I help you, she said slowly, you help me. I need 3 months of mortgage payments by the end of November, or the bank takes Silver Ranch. If I lose the ranch, I lose everything my father built. Everything I have left. Micah frowned. I am a bounty hunter, not a bank robber. No. But you are someone this town does not know yet. Someone who could be useful. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. The bank examiner is a deacon at our church. He cares more about appearances than numbers. If I show up to services with a respectable man on my arm, if I look like I am settling down instead of brawling at town dances, he might give me an extension, long enough to sell off some stock. Long enough to make the payment. You want me to pretend to court you. I want you to help me look stable and respectable long enough to save my ranch. In return, I will tell you where Greer is hiding. Micah shook his head slowly. That is a terrible plan. It is the only plan I have. What happens when I arrest Greer? When your fake courtship ends, and the whole town knows you lied. Then I will deal with that when it comes. But at least I will still have my ranch. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he exhaled, a sound somewhere between frustration and resignation. 3 weeks. I will give you 3 weeks of public appearances. Church, town socials, Sunday dinners. After that, you tell me where Greer is, and I bring him in. No excuses. No delays. Willa felt relief and dread tangle in her stomach. Agreed. Micah held out his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. A deal made in shadows and silence. A lie that would save her or destroy her, depending on how well they both could pretend. The fiddle music swelled inside the dance hall. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. And Willa Sawyer wondered if she had just made the smartest decision of her life, or the worst mistake she would ever survive. Sunday morning came too soon. Willa stood in front of the cracked mirror in her bedroom, fumbling with the buttons on her good blouse. The cream cotton was faded, but clean. The lace collar carefully mended. She had braided her hair tight and pinned it into a coil at the nape of her neck. Respectable. Proper. The kind of woman who did not throw punches at town dances. Her knuckles were still bruised. She pulled on her gloves and tried not to think about the fact that Micah Hale would be waiting outside the church in 20 minutes. That the entire congregation would see them arrive together. That by noon, the gossip would have traveled to every kitchen and front porch in Willow Fork. This is a business arrangement, she told her reflection. Nothing more. Her reflection did not look convinced. Outside, the October sun was bright and cool. Willa hitched her mare to the small wagon and drove the 2 miles into town, her stomach tight with nerves. Silver Ranch sat at the edge of the valley, close enough to Willow Fork for convenience, but far enough for privacy. The land rolled away in gentle hills, gold and amber in the autumn light. Her father had chosen this place for the water and the grass and the wide sky. He had built the stable and the house and the corrals with his own hands. She would not lose it. She could not. The church stood at the north end of Main Street, a simple white building with a bell tower and plain glass windows. Micah was already there, leaning against the hitching post with his arms crossed. He had traded the duster for a dark jacket, though the gun belt remained. His hair was combed back, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked almost respectable. Almost. Willa climbed down from the wagon and tied the mare. Micah straightened, his gaze sweeping over her with an expression she could not read. "You clean up well," he said. "So do you." She glanced at the church doors, where a cluster of women in their Sunday best had stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Here we go." Micah offered his arm. She hesitated, then took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the jacket sleeve. They walked up the steps together, and the whispering started immediately. "Is that Willa Sawyer? With a man? Who is he? Heard he is a lawman from back east." "No." "A cattle buyer." "No." "A ranch hand, looking for work." Willa kept her chin up and her expression neutral. Beside her, Micah nodded politely to the onlookers, playing his part with surprising ease. They slipped into a pew near the back, and Willa felt the weight of 100 stares pressing against her shoulders. Reverend Cole took the pulpit, a thin man with a voice like gravel and a fondness for long sermons. Willa tried to focus on his words, but her mind kept drifting to the man beside her, to the way his knee almost touched hers in the narrow pew, to the faint scent of soap and leather, to the fact that this was all pretend, and she needed to remember that. Halfway through the sermon, the church door creaked open. Willa glanced back and felt her blood go cold. Silas Greer stood in the doorway. He was exactly as she remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his knuckles and eyes like chips of flint. He wore a clean shirt and a respectful hat, playing the part of a God-fearing traveler. But Willa knew what he was, knew what he had done. Greer's gaze swept the congregation and landed on her. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Then he smiled, slow and cold, and took a seat in the last pew. Willa's hands clenched in her lap. Beside her, Micah had gone very still. He had seen Greer too. She knew it from the way his breathing changed, the way his hand drifted toward his hip before he caught himself. "Not here," she whispered, barely moving her lips. Micah did not respond, but his jaw tightened. The rest of the service passed in a blur. Willa heard nothing, saw nothing, except the back of Silas Greer's head 3 rows behind them. When the final hymn ended and the congregation began to file out, Micah leaned close. "Stay beside me. Do not leave my sight." She nodded, throat dry. They joined the slow procession toward the door. Willa smiled and nodded at the greetings thrown her way, accepting congratulations on her new beau with as much grace as she could muster. Micah shook hands with the deacon, with the mayor, with the bank examiner, who eyed him with cautious approval. And then they were outside, and Silas Greer was standing by her wagon. "Miss Sawyer," Greer said pleasantly. "Fine sermon today." Willa could not make her voice work. Micah stepped forward, placing himself between her and Greer with subtle but unmistakable intent. "Micah Hale," he said, extending his hand. "I do not believe we have met." Greer's smile did not reach his eyes. Silas Greer, new to town, just passing through. They shook hands. Willa watched Micah's face, saw the recognition flash, and then disappear behind a mask of polite disinterest. "Where are you headed?" Micah asked. "Wherever the work is. Heard there might be ranch jobs around here." "Could be." Micah released his hand and stepped back, his body still angled protectively. "Miss Sawyer and I were just about to take a drive. Enjoy your stay in Willow Fork." Greer's gaze slid past Micah to Willa. "Oh, I intend to, Miss Sawyer. I surely do intend to." He tipped his hat and walked away, moving toward the livery stable with the easy stride of a man who owned the world. Willa did not breathe until he disappeared around the corner. "That was him," Micah said quietly. "Yes. He knows you saw something." "Yes." Micah turned to her, his expression grim. "We need to move the timeline up. I am bringing him in tonight." "No." Willa grabbed his arm. "If you go after him now, alone, he will kill you. Greer does not work alone. He has at least 2 men with him. Maybe more. And they are holed up in a canyon outside of town, with clear sight lines in every direction. Then tell me where. Not until you finish what we agreed." 3 weeks. Micah stared at her. "He just threatened you in front of a church full of witnesses, and you want to wait 3 weeks? I want to save my ranch. That was the deal. Your ranch will not matter if you are dead." Willa pulled free, anger flaring hot and sudden. "You do not get to decide what matters to me. You do not get to walk into my life and tell me what risks I can take. I have been surviving just fine without you. Surviving is not the same as living." The words hit harder than she expected. Willa looked away, throat tight. Around them, churchgoers were beginning to disperse, climbing into wagons and walking toward home. The day was bright and clear and utterly normal. Only she and Micah knew how close the danger stood. 2 weeks, she said finally. Give me 2 weeks to get the extension from the bank. Then I will tell you everything. Micah exhaled slowly. 1 week. And you do not go anywhere alone. If I am playing the part of your beau, then I am playing it all the way. That means I am at Silver Ranch every day. That means I am between you and Greer every time he gets close. Willa wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she did not need protection. But the truth was, she was terrified. And having Micah Hale between her and Silas Greer felt like the only solid thing in a world tilting sideways. 1 week, she agreed. They climbed into the wagon together. Willa took up the reins, and Micah settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. As they rolled out of town, she felt the eyes of Willow Fork on her back, felt the weight of the lie she was living, and felt, for the first time in 2 years, like maybe she was not entirely alone. The days that followed were strange and unsettling. Micah moved into the small bunkhouse at Silver Ranch, a drafty one-room structure her father had built for seasonal hands. He spent his mornings helping with the horses, mending fences, mucking stalls. He was good with the animals, patient and steady. The mares responded to him, and even her temperamental stallion, Ash, tolerated his presence. In the afternoons, they made their public appearances. They walked through town together, Micah's hand resting lightly on her back. They took supper at the hotel dining room, where the bank examiner nodded approvingly, and the church ladies smiled with brittle satisfaction. They attended a barn raising at the Miller farm, where Micah worked shirtless in the October sun, hammering beams alongside the other men, while Willa pretended not to notice the way his shoulders moved. And every evening, as the sun set over the valley, they sat on the porch of the ranch house and talked. It started with small things, safe things. Micah told her about growing up in Missouri, about learning to track from his grandfather, about the war that had pulled him away from home and left him hollow. Willa told him about her father, about learning to break horses at 12, about the fever that had taken her mother when she was too young to remember her face. But as the days passed, the conversations grew deeper, more dangerous. On the 4th night, Micah asked about the war memory that woke her at night. Willa told him about the field hospital where she had volunteered, about the boy soldier who had died holding her hand, about the way his eyes had looked past her at the end, searching for something she could not give him. I dream about him sometimes, she said quietly. I dream that I can save him, that I know the right words. But I never do. Micah was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I dream about the men I killed, the ones who did not need to die, the ones I shot because I was scared or angry or too tired to think straight. I dream that they are still alive, that I made different choices, but I never do. Willa looked at him, at the shadows in his eyes, and realized that they were both carrying the same weight, the same unbearable certainty that they had failed someone who mattered. Is that why you became a bounty hunter? She asked. To make up for it? I do not know if you can make up for something like that, but I figured I could at least try to get the guilty ones, the ones who deserve what is coming. And Silas Greer deserves it. Micah's jaw tightened. More than most. On the 6th night, Willa asked about the oath he had mentioned. Micah told her about enlisting, about standing in a dusty camp with his hand over his heart, swearing to defend and protect, about the way that oath had felt like a chain, when he realized the war was not about defense or protection at all. "I broke it," he said flatly. "I walked away. And I have been trying to figure out if that makes me a coward or just smart enough to know when a promise is built on lies." Willa reached across the space between them and took his hand. The gesture was instinctive, unbidden. Micah looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "You are not a coward," she said. "How do you know?" "Because you are here. Because you could have ridden past Willow Fork and kept going. But you did not." Micah's thumb brushed across her knuckles, slow and careful. "And you are not a failure." "How do you know?" "Because you are still fighting. Because you could have sold this place and walked away. But you did not." The air between them thickened. Willa felt her pulse kick, felt the heat of his hand against hers. For a moment, she thought he might lean closer. For a moment, she thought she might let him. Then a horse whinnied in the corral, sharp and alarmed, and the moment broke. Micah was on his feet in an instant, hand on his gun. Willa followed, heart pounding. They moved together toward the barn, every sense alert. Inside, the horses were restless, shifting and snorting. Ash pawed at his stall door, ears flat. Micah gestured for Willa to stay back, then moved deeper into the shadows. A shape detached from the far wall. Willa's breath caught. But it was only a raccoon, fat and indignant, waddling toward the open door with a stolen apple in its paws. Micah lowered his gun, exhaling. "Just a thief." Willa laughed, shaky with relief. "I think we can let that one go." They walked back to the house together, the tension easing. But at the porch steps, Micah stopped. He looked at her with an expression she could not name. "This is getting complicated," he said quietly. "Yes, I am still leaving when this is over. When I bring Greer in, I know. And you are still lying to the whole town. They are going to hate you when the truth comes out. I know that too." Micah reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "Then we should probably stop pretending this is just business." Willa's heart hammered. "We probably should." But neither of them moved. And when Micah finally stepped back and said goodnight, Willa stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the stars and wondering when exactly she had stopped pretending. On the 7th morning, Willa woke to find Micah already in the corral, working with Ash. The stallion was notoriously difficult, prone to biting and kicking anyone who got too close. But Micah moved around him with calm confidence, speaking in a low, steady voice, letting the horse set the pace. Willa watched from the fence, fascinated. After 20 minutes, Ash allowed Micah to touch his shoulder. After 30, he took a carrot from Micah's hand. "How did you do that?" she asked when Micah finally climbed out of the corral. "I did not do anything. I just let him decide I was not a threat." Most people give up on him after 5 minutes. Most people do not understand that fear and aggression are usually the same thing. Willa tilted her head, studying him. "You are talking about more than horses." Micah met her gaze. "Maybe." They walked back to the house together. Willa made coffee while Micah washed up at the pump. It was easy, domestic. The kind of morning routine that should have felt strange, but somehow did not. "The bank examiner is coming tomorrow," Willa said, pouring 2 cups. "If we can convince him we are serious, he will grant the extension. And if we cannot, then I lose everything on December 1st. Micah accepted the coffee, his expression thoughtful. "What if I helped you with the payment?" No. Willa shook her head firmly. This is my problem. I will handle it. You are handling it. You made a deal. I am just offering to adjust the terms. Why? You do not owe me anything. Maybe not. But I owe someone. Might as well be you. The words were gruff, almost dismissive. But Willa heard the truth beneath them. Micah Hale was trying to keep an oath he thought he had broken. Trying to be the man he had promised to be before the war turned him into something else. If you pay the mortgage, she said slowly, then I do not have leverage anymore. You could arrest Greer right now, and I would have no reason to stop you. True. So why make the offer? Because you should not have to choose between your home and your safety. He set down his cup, his gaze steady on hers. And because I am tired of watching you carry this alone. Willa felt something crack open in her chest. Something she had been holding closed for 2 years. She wanted to say yes, wanted to let him help. But she also knew that accepting would change the terms of their arrangement in ways she was not ready to face. One more day, she said. Let me get through the meeting tomorrow. If it does not work, we will talk about other options. Micah nodded slowly. One more day. That afternoon they rode out to check the northern pasture. The land rolled away in gentle waves, gold grass bending under a cool wind. Willa's mare picked her way along the fence line, while Micah rode beside her on a borrowed gelding. They did not talk much, but the silence was comfortable. Easy. They were halfway back when Willa saw the smoke. It rose from the direction of the ranch, a thin, dark column against the blue sky. Her stomach dropped. Fire. She kicked her mare into a gallop, Micah right behind her. They tore across the pasture, the wind whipping her braid loose, her heart slamming against her ribs. By the time they reached the yard, flames were licking up the side of the barn. Willa hit the ground running. Micah was beside her in seconds, grabbing her arm. The horses, she gasped. I will get them. You get water. She did not argue. They split, Willa running for the pump while Micah disappeared into the smoke. She filled bucket after bucket, hauling them to the barn, throwing water on the flames. The heat was brutal, the smoke thick and choking. Her eyes streamed, her lungs burned. Micah emerged leading Ash and 2 mares, their eyes wild with terror. He shoved them into the corral and plunged back inside. Again. And again. Until all 8 horses were safe. By then, half the town had arrived, alerted by the smoke. Men formed a bucket line from the creek. Women pulled Willa back from the flames, wrapping her in a blanket, pressing water into her hands. Someone said the word arson. Someone else said they had seen a man riding away fast toward the canyon road. Willa knew who it was, knew why. The fire was out by dusk, but the barn was a ruin. The west wall had collapsed, the roof was gone, and the stalls were charred wreckage. Willa stood in the yard, staring at the destruction, her hands blistered and her dress streaked with soot. Micah appeared beside her, equally filthy, a cut above his eye, where a falling beam had caught him. Greer? She asked. Has to be. Why now? Because we spooked him. Because he knows I am getting close. Or because he is reminding you what happens if you talk. Willa closed her eyes. I am sorry. Do not. Micah's voice was rough. Do not apologize for him. I should have told you where he was hiding from the start. Should have trusted you. You did not know me. I know you now. Micah looked at her, soot-streaked and exhausted and still holding his ground. Then tell me, right now, before he hurts anyone else. Willa took a shaky breath. Canyon about 8 miles northwest of town. Red rock walls, a spring at the back, a narrow entrance you can defend with 2 men. He has at least 3 people with him. Maybe more. How do you know the layout? Because I used to play there as a child. My father showed me all the hideouts in this valley. Said a smart person knows where to go when trouble comes. And you have been keeping that information to yourself for 6 weeks. Yes. Micah shook his head, but there was no anger in his expression. Just weary understanding. Tomorrow, I am riding in. With or without backup. Then, I am going with you. Absolutely not. He is destroying my life, Micah. I have a right to face him. You have a right to stay alive. Which you will not be if Greer gets his hands on you. Willa stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. You do not get to decide that. You do not get to protect me from my own choices. I am going. And you can either take me as an ally, or I will follow you anyway. Micah stared at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was a hard, reckless smile. The kind that said he knew this was a terrible idea, and he was going to do it anyway. You are going to get us both killed, he said. Probably. But at least we will go down fighting. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb brushing soot from her cheek. His touch was gentle, careful, at odds with the wildness in his eyes. If we survive this, he said quietly, I am going to kiss you. If we survive this, Willa said, I am going to let you. The moment stretched, charged and fragile. Then, Micah dropped his hand and stepped back, his jaw set. Get some sleep. We ride at dawn. That night, Willa lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her body ached, her hands throbbed, and her mind would not stop replaying the sight of the barn burning. But beneath the fear and the exhaustion, she felt something else. Something bright and dangerous and entirely too close to hope. She was done running, done hiding. Tomorrow, she would face Silas Greer, and whatever came after, she would face it standing beside Micah Hale. Dawn came cold and clear. Willa dressed in her work clothes, sturdy boots, and a leather vest. She braided her hair tight and checked the small revolver her father had taught her to shoot. It was not much, but it was something. Micah was waiting by the corral, already saddled. He looked at the gun on her hip and nodded once, approving. Rules, he said. You stay behind me. You do not engage unless I go down. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They rode out together, the valley quiet around them. The sky was pale gold, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Willa's mare moved smoothly beneath her, her hooves muffled by the soft earth. The canyon was exactly where she remembered. Red rock walls rising 50 feet on either side, a narrow entrance barely wide enough for 2 horses. Micah dismounted and studied the ground, his expression grim. Fresh tracks. At least 4 riders. Maybe 5. He is expecting us. Maybe. Or maybe he is just careful. Micah pulled his rifle from the saddle and checked the load. Either way, we are going in. They moved into the canyon on foot, leading the horses. The walls closed in, the shadows deepening. Willa's pulse hammered in her ears. Every sound seemed amplified. The creak of leather, the scrape of a boot, the distant call of a hawk. Halfway in, Micah stopped. He gestured toward a ledge above them, where a man sat with a rifle across his knees, hat pulled low, apparently asleep. "Sentry," Micah whispered. "Sloppy. What do we do?" "Go around." They backtracked and found a narrow trail that switched back up the canyon wall. It was steep and treacherous, loose rock sliding under their boots. Willa's hands were slick with sweat by the time they reached the top. From the ridge, they could see the camp. 3 tents, a fire ring, horses tied in a makeshift corral, 4 men sitting around the embers of a breakfast fire. And in the center, unmistakable even from a distance, Silas Greer. Micah settled into position, rifle braced against a rock. Willa crouched beside him, her revolver drawn. "When I call him out," Micah said quietly, "he is going to draw. His men are going to scatter or fight. Either way, it is going to get loud fast. What do you need me to do?" "Cover the left flank. Anyone who runs that direction, you fire a warning shot. If they do not stop, you aim to wound." Willa nodded, her mouth dry. Micah took a breath. Then he stood, rifle aimed, and his voice rang out across the canyon. "Silas Greer, you are under arrest for robbery and attempted murder. Drop your weapons and step forward." The camp exploded into motion. Greer rolled to his feet, gun already in hand. His men scattered, 2 diving for cover behind the tents, 1 sprinting for the horses. Shots cracked out, echoing off the canyon walls. Micah fired twice, precise and controlled. One of Greer's men went down, clutching his shoulder. Another dropped his rifle and raised his hands. But Greer was moving, fast and low, heading for the narrow trail that led deeper into the canyon. "He is running," Willa shouted. Micah swore and took off after him. Willa followed, her heart in her throat. They plunged down the ridge, half sliding, half falling, the world a blur of red rock and dust and adrenaline. Greer reached the trail first. He turned, gun raised, and fired. The shot went wide, chipping rock inches from Micah's head. Micah returned fire, but Greer was already moving again, disappearing around a bend. They chased him deeper into the canyon, the walls narrowing, the shadows thick. Willa's lungs burned, her legs screamed. Ahead, Micah was a dark shape against the stone, relentless and focused. Then the trail ended. They came around a corner and found themselves in a box canyon, walls on 3 sides, no way out. Greer stood at the far end, backed against the rock, his gun trained on Micah. "Nowhere left to run," Micah said, breathing hard. Greer laughed, cold and sharp. "Neither do you, bounty hunter." His gaze flicked to Willa, and his smile widened. "Brought your sweetheart along." "That was stupid. Leave her out of this." "Oh, she is already in it." Greer's eyes never left Willa. "She saw me that night in the livery. Heard things she should not have heard. I figured I would let her keep quiet, long as she stayed scared. But then you showed up. Started asking questions. Burning her barn was supposed to be a message. Guess she did not get it. I got it, Willa said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. I just did not care. Greer's expression darkened. You should have. He moved fast, swinging his gun toward Willa. Micah was faster. He lunged, slamming into Greer, and they went down in a tangle of fists and fury. Willa saw Greer's gun fly loose, skittering across the dirt. She dove for it, her fingers closing around cold metal. The two men rolled, grappling for control. Greer was bigger, but Micah was faster. He got a knee into Greer's ribs, an elbow to his jaw. Greer snarled and twisted, his scarred hand closing around Micah's throat. Willa raised the gun, her hands shaking. She could not get a clear shot. They were too close, moving too fast. Micah, she shouted. He heard her. In one smooth motion, he shoved Greer back and rolled clear. Greer surged to his feet, reaching for the knife at his belt. Willa fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Greer staggered, looking down at the red blooming across his shoulder. Then he looked at Willa, surprise and grudging respect flickering in his eyes. You got spine, girl, he said. I will give you that. Then his knees buckled, and he went down. Micah was on him in an instant, kicking the knife away, pinning him with a knee to the spine. He pulled a length of rope from his belt and bound Greer's wrists with ruthless efficiency. Willa lowered the gun, her whole body shaking. She had shot a man. She had aimed and pulled the trigger and watched him fall. The weight of it settled over her, heavy and strange. Micah finished securing Greer and stood. He crossed to Willa in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. You did good, he said into her hair. You did exactly right. Willa let herself lean into him, just for a moment. Let herself feel the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. Then, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. Is it over? The shooting part is. Micah glanced at Greer, who was conscious, but quiet. But the rest is going to be complicated. He was right. By the time they brought Greer and his men back to Willow Fork, the entire town was waiting. The sheriff took custody, and the bank examiner stood on the boardwalk, his face pale with shock. News traveled fast in small towns. Within an hour, everyone knew that Willa Sawyer had been keeping secrets, that she had made a deal with a bounty hunter, that the man she had been courting was never really hers at all. The backlash was swift and brutal. That evening, Willa sat on the porch of Silver Ranch, staring at the charred remains of the barn. The church ladies had come by in the afternoon, their faces tight with disapproval, their words cutting and cold. The bank examiner had rescinded his promise of an extension. The mayor had suggested, in carefully polite terms, that perhaps Willa might consider selling and moving on. She had lost everything. Micah found her there as the sun set. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I am sorry, he said. You have nothing to be sorry for. I made it worse. If you had stayed away, Greer would still be out there, and I would still be too scared to do anything about it. Micah was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to Willa. She opened it. It was a bank draft, made out in her name, for the exact amount of her overdue mortgage payments. What is this? The bounty on Greer. It came through this afternoon. I signed it over to you. Willa stared at the numbers, her vision blurring. Micah, I cannot. Yes, you can. You earned it. You are the one who told me where he was. You are the one who faced him down. This is yours. But you need. I do not need anything, he said quietly. I have been running on empty for 2 years, Willa. Chasing bounties, trying to fill a hole that does not get filled. But you have something worth saving, and I want to help you save it. Willa looked at him, at the shadows in his eyes and the stubborn set of his jaw. And she realized that Micah Hale was not trying to save her. He was trying to save himself, trying to prove that the oath he had broken could still mean something. What happens now? She asked. I turn in my report, collect my things, move on to the next job. And us? Micah's expression went carefully neutral. There is no us, Willa. That was the deal. We both knew it. The words hurt more than she expected. But she also knew he was right. They had built their relationship on lies and necessity. And now that the necessity was gone, what was left? Right, she said quietly. No us. They sat in silence as the stars came out. And when Micah finally stood to go, Willa did not ask him to stay. 3 days later, the town held a meeting. Willa was not invited, but she went anyway. She walked into the church hall with her chin up and her hands steady, and she stood in the back while the deacon and the mayor and the bank examiner debated her fate. They called her reckless, dishonest, a poor example for the young women of Willow Fork. They suggested she had brought the trouble on herself by associating with a bounty hunter. They wondered aloud if someone so morally compromised could be trusted to do business in their town. Willa listened to it all with a kind of numb detachment. She had expected this, had known it was coming. But then, someone stood up in the front row. It was Mrs. Holloway, the banker's wife, a formidable woman in her 60s who rarely spoke but commanded absolute respect when she did. I have heard enough, Mrs. Holloway said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. This girl kept silent about a dangerous criminal to protect her home. When that criminal threatened her, she did not run. She stood her ground, and when the time came, she helped bring him to justice. That does not sound like moral compromise to me. That sounds like courage. The room went quiet. Mrs. Holloway turned to face the crowd. How many of us would have done the same? How many of us would have risked everything to stand up to a man like Silas Greer? She made a hard choice in an impossible situation, and instead of supporting her, we are tearing her down. Shame on us. She sat down. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, others began to speak. The blacksmith, who remembered Willa's father. The school teacher, who had bought horses from Silver Ranch for years. The widow Simmons, who said Willa had helped her fix a fence last spring and never asked for payment. One by one, the voices of support grew louder. And by the time the meeting ended, the motion to censure Willa had been quietly withdrawn. She walked out of the church hall into the cool November night, her legs shaking with relief. Micah was waiting by the hitching post, his horse saddled and his saddlebags packed. You are leaving, she said. Yes. Tonight? She said Nord or supposed decree, what's mess, supposed to round her. Be mentaling the story, whether or not her him, or whether my place were lost in Lyle's white. Tonight? Cone let Randy a tensing out on him. I also might have done all the crying the place for stores. Yes. Willa nodded. She had known this was coming too. But knowing did not make it easier. Where will you go? North. There is a fugitive in Montana. After that, who knows? Micah, she started, then stopped. She did not know what she wanted to say. Thank you felt too small. Stay felt too big. He stepped closer. Willa. Yes? She lead more or suppose bitry, what's bless. Suppassed around her. The mentingin stressed to went to where there on the station, or where there is this place where a losting loves white. Yes? Cone liked reanding attempt to get out on her. Clow fell minded then, all the crying planet or spones the twice. You were right. About the oath. About choosing to keep fighting. I did not believe it until I met you. But I believe it now. But I believe it now. Good, she said, her voice thick. That is good. Micah reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid, and entirely too brief. If you ever need anything, he said, you know how to find me. Then he let go, mounted his horse, and rode away into the dark. Willa stood in the street for a long time, watching the place where he had disappeared. Then she walked back to Silver Ranch. Alone, but not defeated. She had her land. She had her horses. And she had survived. It would have to be enough. Winter came hard and fast. Willa threw herself into the work. She used the bounty money to pay off the mortgage and hire 2 ranch hands to help rebuild the barn. By mid-December, the new structure was standing, plain but solid. She broke 3 new horses and sold them to a cattle outfit in Dodge City. She attended church every Sunday and endured the whispers with her head high. But at night, alone in the ranch house, she thought about Micah Hale. About the way he had looked at her in the firelight. About the promise he had made and never kept. If we survive this, I am going to kiss you. They had survived. And he had left without a word. Willa told herself it was for the best. That they had always been temporary. That she had built her life around being alone, and she did not need anyone. But the ranch felt emptier than it ever had before, and the silence at night was unbearable. January brought a blizzard that lasted 3 days. Willa and her ranch hands worked around the clock to keep the horses fed and the water troughs from freezing. On the 3rd night, exhausted and half frozen, she stumbled into the house and found a man sitting at her kitchen table. She had her gun out before she registered who it was. Micah raised his hands slowly, his expression sheepish. Easy. I knocked. You did not answer. Willa lowered the gun, her heart hammering. What are you doing here? I was in the area. Montana is not in the area. Micah shrugged. I finished the job early. Figured I would swing by. Make sure you were not dead. Well, I am not. I can see that. They stared at each other. Micah looked thinner, his face more weathered. But his eyes held the same shadows she remembered. The same quiet intensity. Why are you really here? She asked. Micah stood. He crossed the kitchen slowly, stopping a foot away from her. Because I lied. About what? About there being no us. About moving on. about being fine with walking away. Willa's breath caught. Micah. I tried, he said quietly. I rode north. Took another job. Told myself it was better this way. But every night, I thought about you. About the way you stood up to Greer. About the way you looked at me like I was still worth something. And I realized I did not want to keep running. I wanted to stay. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. What are you saying? I am saying I want to stop chasing ghosts and start building something real. I am saying you asked me once what I needed, and I think the answer is you. I am saying if you will have me, I would like to stay. For how long? As long as you will let me. Willa looked at him, at the man who had ridden into her life like a storm and left her fundamentally changed. The man who had seen her at her worst and chosen her anyway. I thought you were gone for good, she whispered. I thought I was too. But I was wrong. He reached up and cupped her face, his touch gentle and sure. And this time, when he leaned in, Willa did not hesitate. She closed the distance and kissed him. It was nothing like she had imagined. It was better. It was fire and relief and the taste of snow. It was the promise of something solid and real and worth fighting for. When they finally pulled apart, Micah rested his forehead against hers. I am still a mess, he said quietly. I still have nightmares. I still do not know if I will ever feel whole again. Good, Willa said. Because so am I, and so do I. We can be a mess together. Micah laughed, soft and surprised. That is the worst sales pitch I have ever heard. Then stop complaining and kiss me again. He did. Spring came slowly, melting the snow and turning the valley green. Micah moved into the ranch house. He worked the land beside Willa, mending fences and training horses, and learning the rhythms of a life built on something other than running. They fought sometimes, sharp and fierce, both of them too stubborn to back down easy. But they also learned to apologize, to listen, to choose each other, even when it was hard. In March, the church held a social. Willa and Micah attended together, his hand steady on her back, her head high. The whispers had faded. The judgment had softened. Willow Fork had moved on to newer scandals. But more than that, Willa had stopped caring. She had found something more valuable than the town's approval. She had found a partner, a home, a reason to believe that the past did not have to define the future. In April, Micah proposed. It was not romantic or elaborate. They were standing in the new barn, feeding the horses, when he said, I think we should get married. Willa looked at him. Hay in her hair, dirt on her hands. That is your proposal? Micah grinned. You want me to get down on one knee? I want you to ask, like you mean it. He set down the bucket, took her hands, looked at her with an expression that made her chest ache. Willa Sawyer, will you marry me? Not because it is practical, not because it makes sense, but because I love you, because I want to build a life with you, because you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I do not want to spend another day without you. Willa smiled, tears streaming down her face. Yes. They were married in the same church where Micah had first kissed her hand in front of the congregation. The ceremony was simple, attended by the whole town. Mrs. Holloway cried. The bank examiner actually smiled. And when the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Micah pulled Willa close and kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Except, that is not how the wedding went. The ceremony started smoothly enough. Willa stood at the altar in a borrowed dress, her hair pinned up with wildflowers. Micah stood beside her in a dark suit he had bought in town, his hair combed back, his expression soft and sure. Reverend Cole began the vows. "Do you, Willa Marie Sawyer, take this man?" The church doors slammed open. A man stood in the entrance, backlit by the afternoon sun. He was tall, gray-haired, wearing a marshal's badge and a grim expression. "Micah Hale," the marshal said, his voice echoing through the church. "You are under arrest for aiding and abetting a fugitive, obstruction of justice, and falsifying a federal bounty claim." The congregation gasped. Willa felt the blood drain from her face. Micah did not move, but his jaw tightened. "Marshal Garrett," he said quietly, "this is not the time. The time was 3 months ago, when you were supposed to report in." The marshal strode down the aisle, his hand resting on his gun. "Instead, you have been hiding out here, playing house. And now I have got a witness saying you let 2 of Greer's men go free in exchange for his confession." "That is a lie," Willa said, stepping forward. Micah brought in everyone who was there. "I saw it. With all due respect, miss, you are not exactly an unbiased source." The marshal stopped at the altar, his gaze hard on Micah. "You have been bending the rules since the day I pinned that badge on you. I let it slide because you got results. But this time, you went too far." Micah met his eyes steadily. "Greer is in custody. The payroll money is recovered. What more do you want? I want you to come in and answer for what you did. If you are innocent, you have got nothing to worry about. And if I am not, then you will face trial like anyone else." The church was utterly silent. Willa looked at Micah, saw the conflict in his face. He could run. He could fight. But he would not, because that would prove the marshal right. "Give me a week," Micah said. "Let me finish this wedding. Let me get my affairs in order. Then I will come in voluntarily." "You will come in now." The marshal gestured, and 2 deputies stepped forward from the back of the church. "I am sorry, Hale, but you are under arrest." Willa moved without thinking. She stepped between Micah and the deputies, her chin up, her hands shaking. "No," she said. "Miss Sawyer," the marshal said patiently, "step aside." "No." Willa's voice was steady now, ringing clear. "You want to arrest someone? Arrest me. I am the one who told Micah where Greer was hiding. I am the one who delayed his capture for weeks because I was trying to save my ranch. If anyone obstructed justice, it was me." "Willa," Micah said sharply. "Do not." She ignored him. "I will testify. I will go on record. But you do not get to walk in here and take him on his wedding day without giving him a chance to defend himself." The marshal studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You have got spine, miss. I will give you that. But the law is the law. He comes with me. If you want to testify on his behalf, you can do that at the hearing. In the meantime, step aside." Willa looked at Micah. He shook his head, his expression torn between frustration and something that looked almost like pride. "It is all right," he said quietly. "Let them take me." "No, it is not all right. This is wrong. Maybe. But fighting it here will not change anything." His hand found hers, squeezed once. "Trust me. I will fix this." "How?" "I do not know yet. But I will." The deputies moved forward. They cuffed Micah's wrists, careful and professional. The congregation watched in stunned silence as they led him down the aisle and out into the bright spring day. Willa stood at the altar, her heart breaking, her wedding dress suddenly feeling like a costume. Around her, the church erupted into whispers. But she did not hear them. She was already moving, pushing through the crowd, running after the man she had just promised to marry. The trial was set for 3 weeks later in the county seat. Willa spent every waking moment preparing. She rode to the canyon and documented every detail of Greer's camp. She tracked down the 2 men the marshal claimed Micah had let go and discovered they had been arrested in Kansas 2 weeks after Greer's capture. She interviewed every witness, copied every record, built a case so airtight it could not be ignored. And when the day came, she stood in the courtroom and testified. She told the truth. All of it. The barn fire, the chase, the box canyon, the shot she had fired that brought Greer down. She admitted her own delays, her own fears, and she made it clear that Micah Hale had acted with integrity every step of the way. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. The prosecutor had no questions. The judge looked thoughtful. And Micah, sitting at the defense table, looked at her like she had just handed him the world. The verdict came down the next day. Not guilty on all counts. Micah walked out of the courthouse a free man. Willa met him on the steps, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "You saved me," he said. "No," she said. "We saved each other." They were married 2 days later in the judge's office. A quiet ceremony with Mrs. Holloway and the sheriff as witnesses. No congregation. No scandal. Just the 2 of them and the promise they had tried to make once before. They returned to Silver Ranch in the evening. The valley spread out below them in shades of gold and green. Micah pulled Willa close as they stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they would build together. "I am glad you punched me," he said. Willa laughed. "That is a terrible thing to be glad about. But if you had not, I never would have stopped. Never would have stayed. Never would have found this." "Found what?" "Home." Willa leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the girl she had been 6 months ago. Scared. Alone. Convinced she had to carry everything by herself. She was not that girl anymore. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." And as the stars came out above Silver Ranch, Willa Sawyer and Micah Hale stood together, no longer running from the past, no longer afraid of the future. Just 2 people who had chosen each other, again and again, until the choice became a life.